Goeiedag! Good day, fellow South Africans, and look, this is a hugely important video that I'm just sending out now, okay? And this goes out to fellow South Africans and, of course, citizens of the world. Now, in the first video that I'm going to play, you're going to see one Cyril Ramaphosa stuck in a train for 3.5 hours because of load shedding. Isn't that poetic justice? But that's the good side of this video, which gets very, very much worse, believe me. Following that video, which I'll play straight after the one of Ramaphosa stuck in the train, is the NUM, which is the trade union movement in South Africa, saying that Ramaphosa is telling porcupines because there is no load shedding in South Africa. That's the state of South Africa right now. So we'll start off with those two videos, and excuse my camera, it's the only way I can use it right now. I'm so looking forward to being in front of my normal computer. All right, guys, here are the first two videos.
Are you stuck with the president?
Yes, indeed, that is the case. We're going to try and squeeze through here. As we've been telling you throughout the morning that the train has been packed. You have a couple of other people who have managed to get off the train now as they make their way to the various destinations. And there you have it, the president of the country. Mr. President, it's been over, what, 2 hours now since we've been on this train?
2.5.
2.5 hours, yeah.
Almost coming on to getting to 3 hours. 7:30 we boarded, so it's almost 3 hours now.
Levels of frustration and just seeing people jumping off the train, some even breaking the law.
Yeah, levels of frustration are quite high, but the people surprisingly remain very patient. Patient because they are hoping that the ANC will see what's happening and bring about changes. And that is precisely what is inspiring me and the Premier, that we must now take action and see how we can bring about these changes that our people so need. Because the way they are transported is not ideal. This is not how we want to see working people being transported. Some of them are students, some of them are job seekers, and you just really destroy their enthusiasm about getting into a public transportation system like this. So we will be paying good attention to this. I'm rather glad that I came. I've seen for myself, because it's no longer a fable. It's the lived reality of our people, and we are going to take steps to change the situation, because our people deserve the best.
Has there been any word from PRASA, maybe to the officials in your office, about why there is these delays?
Well, no, we haven't interacted with PRASA yet, but we're going to interact with them at the highest level to make sure that the board chair and the CEO, acting or otherwise, gets to fully understand the level of anger and frustration that is amongst our people here. So I'm sure that beyond this, we should see some meaningful changes. Yeah.
Mr. President, I know that we spoke about this earlier on, and this is the issue around Eskom. And there are levels of frustration, whether it is in an office, whether it is at the house, whether it is on the roads as well, where people are complaining about these electricity outages, and now we're experiencing load shedding level 4. Would you say that this is a national crisis?
Well, Eskom, we have always said, plays a critical role in the life of South Africa and life of South Africans. So, due to the important role that it plays in the economy, its inability to provide electricity on demand, on time, is a crisis. I've said as much. And I've said that we should pay due attention to what needs to be done. We've now been hit by a slightly different type of problem, where one of the generating sources, Cahora Bassa, has been hit by a cyclone. It's a natural disaster, unforeseen. We're concerned about that, and for that reason we sent out Defense Force units to go and check what's happening in Mozambique and make sure that we put it back in place, because it's important for our economy that we should continue generating electricity at the high level. So it is a huge national problem. Yeah.
Well, certainly. Just a final one, Mr. President. I know I always try to push. The arrest relating to the murder of Sindiso Makaka. Just reaction from your side. Of course, one of the suspects is a senior ANC member in KZN.
Well, you may recall that a few months ago I went to KZN after the killing of Comrade Mkunu, and I immediately said that the Minister of Police, Justice and Defense should set up a task team, and we're now beginning to see the fruits of the step that we took then. A number of people have been arrested, and the killings have come down, and perpetrators have been pursued, some have been charged and sentenced, and now this is one of the latest ones. And we say the rule of law must take its course, because no one should ever do wrong things in the country and hope that they will do it and get away with it without being accountable. So accountability means that we should be able to follow these things up, and those who are responsible should be booked. And we're seeing that is something that's happening.
Will you make it to your top 6 officials meeting on time?
No, I'm very concerned that I'm already a good few minutes late, so I won't be able to make it on time. But I hope that they'll be able to keep a slot for the issues I want to raise.
Okay, then thank you so much. There you have it, the President of the country sitting next to the Premier as well as the regional chairperson of the city of Tshwane for the ANC. Of course, as we've indicated that we are stuck, as I said on Twitter, giving people update that we are now on code stuckmentation number 4 as we head to Bosman Station. And Mr. President, just so you know that there are a couple of ANC members who are already outside the station who are singing in anticipation, hoping that the President will arrive, but at this rate, the President will arrive late.
Of metal workers is supporting a court bid by the Coal Transporters Forum against independent power producers. It's asked the North Gauteng High Court to stop Eskom from signing power purchase agreements with the independent power producers. Judgment has been reserved. NUMSA believes the introduction of IPPs will result in the loss of thousands of jobs. The union's Phakamanied Majola spoke to my colleague Tony Ndoro a little earlier. She says load shedding is a lie created to privatize Eskom.
That's a lie. When did load shedding begin? It began in 2008, and it had nothing to do with cyclones. The fact of the matter is, the load shedding we're experiencing right now is because it actually plays into the hands of this government whose intention is to privatize Eskom and sell it to the private sector. That is their intention. And as long as load shedding continues, well, I mean, you can choose to believe the president, that's fine, but we don't. We have actual first-hand experience of knowing that that is not something that we can take seriously. We know for a fact that long before the cyclone hit, you had load shedding taking place in 2008. The people who benefited from that were Eskom executives who, through corruption, benefited through the high cost of diesel. Nothing was done about that corruption. It was allowed to continue.
Who are the people benefiting now in 2019? Who are the people benefiting now?
The people who are benefiting now are the ANC government, whose goal it is to privatize Eskom. If the load shedding continues, they can justify why Eskom must be privatized. They can justify why thousands of jobs must be lost. They don't have to take responsibility for the looting, the corruption, and the destruction that they have wreaked on Eskom for the past 25 years when they've been running the SOE. They get to start over, fresh start, no accountability, no responsibility.
Okay, You saw what Ramaphosa had to say. Not my fault, not on my watch. And you heard what Namza had to say. Oh, well, you know, we're the guys who are shouting for all these extra goodies and etc., etc., etc. But Ramaphosa is lying because there is no load shedding. Now, I have two separate reports from people who are very closely tied up with the situation here. And we start off with Charles. Charles wrote, just to clarify a few points on your last video. Now remember, the last video was talking about this weekend. If Eskom collapses, then there's a huge issue. And Charles says, I worked at Eskom in the generation control and network stability analysis field. And he says, point number one, a complete blackout does not have to last a few hours for it to take a long time to recover. The power system needs stability. Since electricity moves at the speed of light, instability also propagates at the speed of light. It would only take less than a 1 second complete blackout to fall into that chaotic position. Well, that changes things dramatically, doesn't it? 1 second and the wheels could fall off the entire electricity grid in South Africa. He says, load shedding is like cutting off limbs to keep the core grid stable. Two, this is point number two that Charles is saying, how long does it take to recover? That's a question I asked back in the 1980s when the system was very well run and very well monitored, and there was no clear answer, and obviously not that has been tested. So clearly there's an issue there. Basically, you need a stable network to which you can attach power stations and load to keep the grid stable. If you connect power stations and load to an unstable grid, the power transformers can literally explode. That leads to a chicken and the egg situation. If power transformers are damaged, that will take years to fix. So we're not talking about, you know, plain Lego here. We're talking about a very, very complex system in the hands of idiots. BEE idiots. And no wonder it's collapsing. Excuse me. Okay, let's continue. Basically, you need a stable network to which you can attach power stations and load to keep the grid stable. If you connect power stations and load to an unstable grid, and power transformers can literally explode. Okay, we just talked about that, but it's a very important point. That leads to a chicken and the egg situation. If power transformers are damaged, that will take years to fix. And that's what Saitlanders were talking about in that earlier video. Given the problems, it was clear back then, under good governance, the situation will be much worse now, because it's in the hand of idiots and fools who are there because they're black and because of BEE. They are incompetent, they're corrupt, and they have totally effed over South Africa. And of course the ANC are party to that. Number 3, Ramaphosa's comments, okay? Our friend Ramaphosa about Kabora Bassa are a complete lie. Now, I raised that in my response because I heard what Ted Blom had to say about this earlier. And what Charles says absolutely confirms that. He says Kabora Bassa is 1 gigawatt, less than a 1/4 of a big power station. The system should not fall over because a quarter of a coal power station falls offline. So Ramaphosa is raising the Kabora Bassa, the Mozambique option with the cyclone they had, as a complete furphy, and he knows it. He is lying to the South African public right now because he knows what's coming. Cahora Bassa is on the end of a very long line through a relatively unstable country. It should always be treated as a high-risk power source with local backup ready to take over, operating in a positive position where there is a critical power source is gross negligence. Get that? Gross negligence. And then point 4 that Charles raises is that being able to charge your cell phone with solar only works to an extent. And this is where it gets quite scary because most people now depend on their cell phones to communicate. Cell towers normally have some backup power, but only enough to last 24 hours or so. Then what? So what he's saying is if there's a total blackout and power goes down, you can keep on charging your mobile phone, but those backup towers which you actually transmit your signal through will have no power, so it'll go nowhere. This is scary shit. For any community, watch organization, etc., two-way radios are a good choice because they are independent of the cell network. So guys, with your prepping, get onto two-way radios because they are out of that loop. Okay, that's a very, very important point. Now, okay, that's what Charles wrote. Now, this is what Nikki wrote. Okay, and Nikki has authorized me to supply her phone number or the WhatsApp number where you can get information directly. And she says, be prepared for a state of emergency in South Africa. My sources tell me Eskom could fail as early as this weekend. And then she says, I verified these facts to be correct. And she says, number 1, South Africa is out of diesel. Number 2, pumped storage dams are low. Number 3, no power from Mozambique, 2 lines down. Number 4, 5,000 megawatt, 8 generator units down due to boiler tube leaks. This is in South Africa's own grid system. Number 5, 3 units running but with boiler tube leaks. So basically, even the electricity that you're getting at the moment, they've got a huge issue because they've got boiler tube leaks, which is as a result of incompetence and lack of maintenance. The electricity grid is in a state of collapse right now in South Africa. And if you saw what's happening in Venezuela as a result of their electricity grid going down, you will understand that this is horrifying. And she says number 6, other unplanned outages, and then she gives a link which I will put down below this video so you can go and have a look at this for yourself. And then she goes on to say prayer pointers. So if you're wanting to sit down and pray about this situation, she's giving us a few pointers. She says, number 1, fault in the Cahora Bassa line be found quickly. They have to fly to find the fault. Bridges and roads are washed away. 2, spares will be found and delivered quickly to all units that are down. 3, that guard will make a way to get the diesel that is needed. And 4, that correct expertise be in place to repair the units quickly. Now, you know, the crazy situation in South Africa is that point is there. The correct expertise is there. But you know what? It's very, very highly qualified white people who are actually fleeing the country right now to other countries where they wanted to actually support their power grids. And South Africa's got a huge brain drain going on. And if this government had one little iota of intellect in their collective brains, they would be saying to those people who are still there in South Africa, who are people who've worked for generations, or not generations, but for decades on Eskom and the electricity grid, they would be getting in touch with them and be saying, please, we'll pay you whatever you want. Come and fix up this huge mess that we created. But you know what? Their egos are so friggin' big, their logic is so friggin' low, like the IQ, that they don't understand the dilemma they are facing. They have no rational understanding of what they are doing to their country right now. Because when electricity collapses in South Africa, it's like Dr. Livingstone once said back in the 1800s, it's a dark continent. It's gone back to the dark ages. And if you had a police service that actually worked effectively, that wouldn't be a huge issue. But now that you've got a police service that is completely incompetent because of BEE and the ANC putting their own mates into positions of power in the police service, you've got a huge problem. It is this government is beyond the pale. Its level of corruption, the shit that it's been doing, is just incredible. I'm just absolutely amazed at the patience of the white population. And I'm not being racist. I'm just saying that these guys have seen a country that they handed over in 1994 to a black population falling in a heap because of blatant corruption, because of blatant incompetence, because of affirmative action, BEE, and because everybody in South Africa, in the government and in the bureaucracy, is on the take. That's how friggin' failed South Africa is. Now, getting back to Nikki's, I'm sorry, I went off topic a bit there, but getting back to Nikki's email, she says, look, please forward this to as many as possible and let's be involved to actively make a difference. And then she gives Dr. Arthur Frost's WhatsApp number, which is 0808 265 92224. I'll repeat that again. It's 08 265 92224. And she says, you're welcome to WhatsApp me to be added to my WhatsApp list for prayer strategies, teachings, and info. And she then says 18-03 1404. Nikki Cruden, send it to everyone on your contact list. Let the truth be known. We need to circulate this to show our friends, the idiots in charge of Eskom. The workers on site receive free food parcels every day. Why? Now, let's remember that it wasn't just the average person in South Africa that was Phakamanied today. It was even a Ramaphosa. And when you got your president being put in the position where he's kind of stuck in the middle of nowhere, you know, it just shows how bad the situation has become. They can't even organize transport for their own president in South Africa. Think about it. Imagine if that was Donald Trump in America. Jesus, heads would be rolling left, right, and center. But with Ramaphosa, no, it's all good, it's fine. We're patient people, we don't care. We're just cleaning out the trough, taking every single cent we can out of the economy. You know, it is just crazy. Anyway, continuing with what Nikki has to say. She says regarding workers on site receiving free food parcels, there was an agreement with Eskom. Now this is the NUM. Remember the mob who said that Ramaphosa is lying? Okay, they represent these workers. And listen to what Nikki has to say, and you'll see this vicious circle that goes on. There was an agreement with Eskom that after 1 year, they, the employees of Eskom, would receive hot meals instead of food parcels. MPS stroke 3V employees are now upset at not receiving hot meals as promised, and yesterday they protested by throwing their food parcels at management. Now you might get an idea why Eskom needs a couple of billions. Daily, thousands of employees at Medupi receive free food on top of free accommodation, transport, etc. And considering 900,000 people lost their jobs last year, and how many millions of people are living in poverty and don't know where their next meal is coming from, these people are just a waste of space. Now you have a clear picture of the 35% increase by Eskom for the next 3 years. If these people can be so blatant about what they want from Eskom, then why can't we as a society stand up to Eskom and not just accept their increases every time they cry out that they don't have funds? Why are they making their problem ours and squeezing the most out of us? We are working very hard for ourselves and our families, not for Eskom. And I think that's what the problem is. They think they're a sacred crow. And the final video, which I'm going to play now, is that according to this report, Eskom is going to continue to implement stage 4. Now, we've heard what Charles had to say about if a blackout happens, you know, it's chaos. We go back to the dark ages in South Africa. We've heard what Nikki had to say about the state of the system within Eskom. It's chaos. And you know what? There's one common denominator right through all the state-owned enterprises, and that is a thing called BEE. Now, as a historian, I know for a fact, and I'll give you one specific example to prove the point. There's a little town called Griquatown, which is nestled in basically the middle of South Africa, and it was the first settlement in South Africa north of the Orange River, which is occupied by the Griqua people. Now you might be wondering why I'm talking about this, and the point will come very clear very shortly. There was a lady by the name of Hetta Haga who was the curator of that museum. She was a Boer, an Afrikaans lady. She did a fantastic job. I met her several times. I've been to the Griquatown Museum several times. I've got some of Hetta Haga's books which talk about the Griqua language and history and stuff like that. And at the age of 65, she was told she had to retire. And this happened in 2011, she had to retire. And she offered to go and work there free of charge because she loved being in the museum. And the museum board said, no, we don't need you. You know, you're fine. We got someone to replace you. You know who they put in as her replacement? The cleaning lady at the Griquatown Museum, known as the Mary Moffat Museum. The cleaning lady! Now, transpose that to BEE in places like Eskom, SABC, Denel, you name it, South African Airways. You can imagine the level of incompetence that has been imposed on once very, very efficient organizations in South Africa. This is crazy shit. So I'm going to close off with this final video, and I look forward to seeing your comments. And please, guys, remember to prep, because when the grid does go down, God knows when it'll go up again. Okay? That's how bad it is. And that's been confirmed by a couple of people now who've actually got the information and the expertise and confirmed what I said earlier. All right. Our thoughts and our prayers are with you. It's going to be a very, very long week for a lot of you, I know that. And I am so sorry about what's happening. Bye guys, take care, and please remember to subscribe to be kept informed, because I do get the inside information here. You do hear it first here, and you won't hear it on the mainstream media because they are not interested in the truth. All right, guys, take care and bye for now.
More on our top story. Now, Eskom will continue to implement stage 4 load shedding until 11 o'clock tonight. Stage 2 load shedding will be implemented from 11 this evening until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. The country will face another full day of stage 4 load shedding tomorrow. Well, some experts say South Africa is undergoing an energy crisis. The utility says the bad weather in Mozambique has impacted power lines that contribute electricity to the South African grid. Where does this leave consumers in the short and long term? Well, Hilton Trollip is from the University of Cape Town's Energy Research Center and joins us now to discuss this. Good evening, Hilton. Thanks very much for your time. How big a factor in your view is the whole Cahora Bassa situation in Mozambique? Because I read somewhere people who were saying, no, I mean, what's happening in Mozambique should not have been a factor at all. Besides, we've been having this situation long before what actually happened in Mozambique a few days ago.
That's quite correct, Rio. The South African power system should be resilient enough so that if we just lose Cahora Bassa, which is roughly 2,000 megawatts of generation, we should have enough generation in reserve. But in fact, we don't have that generation in reserve. So we can't blame the Cahora Bassa. We have to blame the performance of the Eskom generation fleet. So I'll tell you a few things about what the problems with that fleet is before I offer a solution. But firstly, what we have to realize is that there's no short-term solution to this problem. It has been long in coming. It started off in 2001 when Cabinet ordered Eskom not to build any more power stations and to get IPPs, independent power producers, onto its transmission network, and Eskom just simply didn't do that. So that by 2005, we had a power shortage already, and Eskom, almost in emergency mode, started building Medupi and Kusile. So Eskom had shown that it would not answer to government then. Then on top of this, when it started building Medupi, it gave contracts to a company called Hitachi Africa, which was 25% owned by Chancellor House, the ANC investment arm. And it subsequently turned out in a US court in the District of Columbia that, and I'm going to read from the filing of that court, from the settlement, it said that Hitachi Africa paid a dividend to Chancellor House. But the dividend was, in fact, an amount due for payment to a foreign political party in exchange for its political influence in assisting Hitachi land to government contracts. So we now have a situation where instead of the contracts being given to the best bidder on technical excellence and price, instead it's given to people with connections. So if you get a contract with connections, you can imagine that when you have to deliver on that contract, you'll also have special connections in not being held to account if things don't work out well. So what happened with Medupi is it's now not complete. More than 12 years later, many of the components are faulty, and it's cost double the price. And we can't fix this overnight. So I want to explain one other problem. Eskom spends 50 billion rand a year buying coal. In 2007, most of the coal contracts went to long-term contracts By 2013, 30% of this 50 billion was going to short-term contracts, and all these contracts are secret, and the price of coal had gone up between 2 and 3 times, and the price of electricity by 2 and 3 times. So essentially, over this 20-year period, we've created a situation of what I will call unaccountability and impunity for Eskom to buy its capital plant according to contacts, in other words, from its friends, to buy coal from its friends at inflated prices, and then to not hold these contractors to account when the coal is below standard and when the equipment doesn't work. So that's been long in the making. The solution is actually quite simple. Eskom has demonstrated absolutely clearly that it cannot be controlled from the top. It is simply too complicated, too large, too powerful. There's too much money washing around. So what's happened in the rest of the world is countries take the generation division and they separate it from the transmission grid. So they then say that the transmission grid invites generators to supply power. Vuyo, are you still there?
I'm still here, and I can hear where you're going, but I want to take you a step or two back, and we're going to come in the end to what you are raising now. Accepting that, as you say, there are no short-term solutions, right? And accepting also that Kusile and Medupi are there, and of course a lot of money went to where it was never supposed to go, and the ANC's steadfast refusal to take responsibility for that is known. But diesel has been mentioned as an option. In other words, what I'm trying to explore with you right now is, given where we are, the history and everything that goes with that, and some of the things that were paraded as interim and long-term solutions in the past, clearly they haven't given us not only the assurance, but they haven't kept our lights on. So what do we do now, here and now, and notwithstanding the equally bad contracts that we've gotten into as a result, or as people were saying, this is one way of getting out of the crisis we are in right now at the moment?
So, Vuyo, what we do here and now is we recognize that the transmission grid, it's called the system operator, is still working very well. So the first thing we've got to do is make sure that the general malaise in Eskom and the shortage of money and bad governance doesn't damage the transmission grid. So we must take that transmission grid. It is already a separate physical thing, but we must take it out of the Eskom organization. It can be taken into another state-owned entity and made safe there. Then what we do, we separate generation from the transmission grid. Then what we do, like a lot of other countries do, the transmission grid operator then invites Eskom generator, but also other generators, IPPs, to supply power onto the grid. And then it only pays those people that supply reliable power at a competitive price onto the grid. And it also turns out now that wind and solar and batteries and gas are now much cheaper than coal. So what will happen is independent power producers that will build wind turbines, PV farms, battery farms, and gas-fired power stations will quickly build these power stations. We've already had a very successful program called the REI4P, where 6,000 megawatts was built in 3 years. Anyway, we've done that. We know how to do that. We just extend that program, and as fast as possible, we build reliable, low-carbon, cost-competitive power, and we only pay for it when it's delivered onto our transmission grid. So the money doesn't continue going down this black hole.
Well, quite a number of things you are raising there, but here's something I want to bring to your attention. Someone we spoke to earlier, Adil Nshabeleng, says, one, renewable energy is insufficient to meet demand as things stand. Throw into the mix what NUMSA is part of, which is a challenge that independent power producers are coming at a huge price, number one, but secondly, they are nothing but a ploy that will result in job losses, massive job losses, they reckon. And then a third element coming out of what you are prescribing as a possible solution is that what difference is it going to make to take a part of Eskom currently and give it to another state-owned? And what will a state-owned enterprise do which, Eskom as it is could not avoid?
So you've asked quite a few questions there, Vuyo, but let me deal with them one at a time. Firstly, if somebody says that renewable energy plus gas is insufficient, they're simply incorrect. The CSIR, people can Google this, they've modeled extensively how a mixture of wind, PV and gas is cheaper than coal and can reliably supply South Africa with its power needs. Not tomorrow, but it will take some time to transition. So we're talking about a 10 to 20 year transition total, but we can build a lot very quickly in the next 5 years. So they're simply incorrect when they say that renewables plus gas can't supply enough reliable power. The issue of why the grid would not have the same problems as it's got when it's mixed with generation at the moment is when you have the same company owning the generators and the grid, it's called a vertical monopoly. And essentially it's its own customer. So it can't make itself perform well. If you've only got one supplier and that's the only place you can buy stuff from, and also it's your own company, you can't keep them honest. Whereas if you're the grid and you're buying from a number of generators, you make them compete with each other and you only pay for the power that they deliver you. You don't just give them money anyway, which is what happens at Eskom at the moment. Eskom just gets money. It's had many bailouts, but it doesn't have to deliver for that money, and it's not delivering. Those were your first two questions. Vuyo, can you remind me of the last one?
Well, I was really asking whether, it would make any difference really to just move or create another state-owned enterprise that will deal with transmission only. What will that state-owned enterprise do which Eskom has not been able to avoid?
Well, the first thing, Vuyo, is that state-owned enterprise wouldn't have the temptation of all these secret coal contracts. It would be separate from that. So it would just run the transmission grid, and it's much more easy to run a company that just does one thing. Once it does the two things joined together, there are too many places for various, what we've seen, dodgy deals to happen. Whereas if you've just got a transmission company, it's much easier, it's simpler to manage. You can have a simpler management structure, a simple company structure, and it's smaller.
Okay, that's what we're going to leave it for tonight.
And this has been practiced all over the world.
Okay, we'll leave it there for this evening. Thanks very much for your time, Hilton Trolley from the University of Cape Town's Energy Research Centre.